during those careers, I mean, if you look at it from the days that you started all the way to today, what were some of the most exciting achievements that you've made? Maybe dangerous, maybe not dangerous. What sticks out in your mind the most that kind of highlighted your education and training and maybe took you out of your comfort zone?
Well, going through the Marine Tech program was a highlight, very definitely. It was 2 years of diving, some great locations, the Santa Barbara, Channel Islands, that area, getting to use all kinds of different equipment, everything from basic scuba up to mixed gas helmets, dive helmets.
Yeah.
Trying different kinds of dive helmets. A lot of new helmets were coming out at that time, the lightweight fiberglass hats, the Savoys and the Aquadynes. And so we got to try a bunch of that stuff while we were going to school. And that was really great. That would be one high point.
And you've seen some major changes to that equipment over the years, from the Savoys to today with the Kirby Morgans, the super lights, and things like that, right?
Yeah. Because when I got into that school,
Mark 5s were still being used.
Mark 5, copper helmets were still being used. Mark 5s a lot, commercial helmets. At the school, we used the Kirby Morgan air hats and gas hats, which are the ones that were designed by Bob Kirby and built by Bob and Bev Morgan.
Right.
And I look back on that, and I've talked to several people about that in just recent times, comparing that particular helmet with the Mark V, the commercial hats, and looking at the Kirby Morgan design. I said, how can you improve on this as a copper helmet, diving helmet, the standard diving dress helmet? How can you improve on the Kirby Morgan? And nobody can come up with anything that you can do to make that hat better.
Now Gorski might not agree with you.
Totally different kind of helmet.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the Kirby Morgan hats, I'm not talking super lights. I'm talking the copper hats. And the ones that attach to the diver's dress.
Okay.
All right. Helmets. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Those helmets you can't improve on. You can improve on all the others. You can change things, but when you get to the Kirby Morgan hat, that's the epitome.
Wow, incredible.
And the other thing, a couple things, little side stories if you want.
Please.
Okay. In 2004 or 5, Bob Kirby was going to put on a seminar. Some guys coming from Australia wanted to learn how to build Kirby Morgan hats, his style, because they weren't marketed anymore. And a lot of people were building their own, modifying the helmet. So Bob was going to put on this seminar, and somehow I learned about it, and I got in touch with him and asked him if I could come down and videotape it. So I got to spend 3 days with Bob Kirby.
Incredible.
Bob Kirby teaching this class on how to modify a helmet from a Chinese hat, was what they started with, to a finished Kirby Morgan style helmet.
You must be the only video of that demonstration in the world.
Yeah, I think it is.
Incredible.
But anyway,
that's like National Geographic timeline right there.
Yeah. But the interesting part of it was, through the whole process of this 3-day seminar, Bob talked about, as he was working, how helmets were built, different ways of manufacturing helmets. He talked about the tools of the trade, spent a lot of time talking about acetylene torches, how to use them for cutting and soldering, foundry operations, how to build molds for foundry, to build the brass parts.
Right, pounding those out and pouring them.
Yeah, wow. And then going into this, how the process of converting a kind of a crappy sort of half-made
copper
helmet,
bucket,
into this beautiful, highly efficient, fantastic diving helmet. And
I'd look forward to seeing that. I mean, that's something that needs to be on the air.
It was a lot of fun to do.
I bet it was.
The other story in my connection with Kirby Morgan, in 2006, the Historical Diving Society held a conference in Seattle.
Right, that was the first time that was ever done.
First time we'd been up here. Yes.
Right, I remember that.
And there was a guy. Well, there's a guy that lives in Bellevue named Robert Martin, And he had written a book called Commercial Diver Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. And somehow, I can't remember how we were connected, but we got connected because I'd written an article about the Pacific Northwest style of diving helmet. But I didn't want to get up in front of the crowd and present it myself, and we talked Bob into doing this presentation, presenting my paper in front of this audience, because his credentials were really good. He'd gone to Divers Institute of Technology, and then he'd written this book. He had worked at Boeing for a long time. So his roots were up here, and he had the connection.
Is he still alive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And anyway, so working with him on getting ready to do this presentation for our conference, I visited him in his home one day, and he said, "I've got something to give you." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Tell me the story about how he had contacted Kirby Morgan when he was writing his book, contacted Kirby Morgan asking for information about their helmets." And he reaches into a file and he pulls out a folder, and he reaches into the folder and he pulls out some folded up pieces of paper and hands them to me. And I open them up, and they are drawings I had done of the Kirby Morgan helmets when I was going through the drafting class at Santa Barbara City College.
Really? Your drawings?
Yeah, my drawings.
How did and Kirby Morgan sent him your drawings?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Because Kirby
Sid.
Morgan worked really closely with the dive program.
Sure.
So somehow my drawings had gotten from the school to Kirby Morgan, who kept them on file.
That's amazing.
And
the
then,
actual originals he sent.
No, these were copies of the originals.
Okay.
And I'll be honest with you, I don't know whatever happened to the originals.
Right.
But then at DEMA last year, I was talking with Bev Morgan. Not DEMA, Underwater Intervention.
Okay.
Talking with Bev Morgan. And I told him that story, and he said, "I remember those drawings."
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my
something to frame up.
Yeah.
For the old office for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So Sid, now those are some incredible highlights. What are you doing today? What do you see yourself doing? I mean, what you're involved in the Historical Diving Society. You're consulting. You're creating underwater photography. What else are you doing?
Actually trying to be retired, but all this other stuff's getting in the way.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
No, I'm with the HDS, Historical Diving Society, as the president right now, and I do speaking presentations on dive history. I write the column for the journal. In fact, I write a couple for the journal every quarter. I still am pursuing underwater photography and video.
Good. And any special projects coming up that are you look forward to doing?
There's one or two that I'd really like to do if I could break away from these other things that get the time to do it. One of the things I'd like to do is an underwater tour from the upper reaches of a small Oregon stream to the ocean.
That means you'll have to come to the Columbia River right past Astoria.
Yeah.
That's a long reach.
No, I could do the Coast Range.
Oh, okay, all right.
But it's something.
Spence Campbell swam from Portland to Astoria. I mean, that's
But that's a project I would very much like to do.
Yeah.
And I do produce videos, historical videos for the society. The one we were talking about a little bit ago about the history of diving in Oregon. Were we talking about that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Anyway, yeah, that was a fun project to do because I got to meet a lot of really neat Oregon divers
that are no longer around.
Some of them still are, some of them aren't. Yeah.
And you're the producer of Swirling Dark Waters.
Well, that's the one I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Okay. All right.
That was 100 years of diving in Oregon, and the interesting thing to me from that project, as far as the history of diving in Oregon, I mean, it parallels the history of diving everywhere. But when I first started the project, I was thinking, how am I going to come up with enough stuff to fill a 30-minute video? Because I knew a little bit about it. I knew Tom Ammerman because of my connection through Larry Blum. I knew of Fred Devine because I read about him in magazines. And that was about it. And then when I go to dive shops and say, okay, I want to work on this project. I'm gathering information. Do you know anybody that's been diving a long time that might have some background they could share? And they say, oh yeah, we know this guy's been diving forever. He started diving in 1972.
72.
Yeah, 72. So I said, well, okay. But one lead led to another.
Sure.
You know, and I'd eventually started running into people that were diving in the 50s. And that was on the recreational side.
Which ended up actually turning into commercial. There were some stories of the Columbia River Bridge of recreational divers end up actually diving commercial.
Yeah,
I think that's the Swirling Dark Waters.
Yeah, it is.
It is. Yeah.
But then I go to the commercial guys and ask them the same kinds of questions.
Sure.
And they would know the guy that broke them into the dive field, and maybe a little bit about the guy that broke that guy into the dive field. But that was as far as the history went.
Sure.
So I'm thinking this is going to be kind of tough to do. But once I got into the project, started gathering information, collecting photographs, collecting stories, when I got around to editing, I'm looking at thinking, what am I going to leave out? Because I can't put all this in. The dive history of Oregon predates the dive history of the Monterey Bay abalone divers,
right,
and the Tarpon Springs sponge divers by a quarter century.
It's incredible. I mean that definitely needs to be documented in a more. Are you going to put this out in Historical Diving Society? I mean, is it going to the chronology of diving in Oregon and the West Coast going to come out with a timeline?
It should. That's all in the video Swirling Dark Water.
Yeah,
it's all there. But to put it in printed form would probably be a really good idea.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be done.
But it's a really intriguing story, and you were talking about how things kind of crossed over. Yeah. Because a lot of the early recreational divers did get into commercial diving, and one of the guys I interviewed was talking about that. That's how he got into commercial diving, and he referred to that group of people as the whiskey bottle divers.
Yeah, right.
Because you had the old traditional hard hat guys, the Fritz Durocs, the Clyde Leasers, Fred Devines, and he said these were the kind of like the gods of diving, and they showed up on the job, and they were there to dive, and that's what they did. And he said, and then you got these recreational guys that were looking at a way to make some money, and they could move around a lot faster. They could dart here and there because they had scuba tanks and swim fins, and they could do all this stuff. And they do it for a bottle of whiskey, instead of money, So that's how he referred to them as whiskey bottle divers. And it changed because some of those guys became really well-known commercial divers.
That sounds like a great title of a book, Sid.
Whiskey bottle divers.
Whiskey bottle divers.
There you go.
There you go. Yes.